Ready? My name's
Okay.
Hull, and I am so excited to be facilitating for Unit 1 for the We the People National Finals. Final day, top 12. The judges will introduce themselves, followed by the students. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 10 minutes of judge questions, which still somehow isn't enough. My microphone will be muted, but I will be holding up 1 minute and time signs, and I suggest you use gallery view instead of speaker view. At the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will give some brief feedback, and I am recording this. All right, here we go.
I'm sorry, can you see me? Before we get started, we can't control the gallery view from here in this setup. Can you
want me to take them off Spotlight?
Yeah, can you take them off of Spotlight?
I can.
Okay, perfect.
God, we have you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, here we go. I'm muting myself and judges are on.
Hello, Wisconsin. I won't make any cheesehead jokes. I love Wisconsin. But I am Margot Lambert. I'm a professor of history at the University of Cincinnati, Blue Ash College, and I have spent time in your beautiful state, and Madison is one of my favorite cities.
I'm Sue Leeson, a senior judge on the Oregon Supreme Court, and with this reconfiguration, I can't see Drew Conlon and Annabelle, so you're going to have to speak up because you're just tiny little dots on my computer.
Okay.
Now I can see you again.
Whenever they talk, that you'll be able to see them.
Oh, beautiful.
It will switch immediately to that.
Excellent.
There's an ambulance. There's something with a siren going right by my house. We can all hear that. Let the fire truck pass. And hi, my name is Tanya McConnell. I was a professor of history at Columbia College in South Carolina for many years, but I wanted to do something different. So now I am teaching high school students, very much like you. I'm honored to be here with you. I hope you're having a great day and a good time with this competition.
So please introduce yourselves, your teacher, and tell us where in Wisconsin you are all from.
Hello, we are juniors from Wauwatosa West High School, state champions of Wisconsin, representing Unit 1. I'm Annabelle Wooster.
I'm Conlon Welch.
And I'm Drew Freeborn. We are here on behalf of our mentors, our teaching assistants, and our teacher, Mr. Chad Mateski.
I'm muted. Okay, forgive me. I was muted. So we are Unit 1, of course, and we are doing question 2. The foundation, I'll give you a minute. Okay. The foundation for good government is the rule of law. John Adams once wrote, good government is an empire of laws. How, if at all, is the rule of law embedded in our founding documents? What challenges to the rule of law, if any, have we experienced in our history? And in what ways, if any, has the rule of law been important to the preservation of a free society? You may begin.
Thomas Paine asserted, whatever is my right as a man is also the right of another. This is the basis of rule of law, which universally holds people to clear, public, and fair standards, authority included. Respect for rule of law protects against tyranny and helps ensure a free, fair society.
After the 7 Years' War, the American experience under the British rule was often arbitrary and capricious. This led directly to the Declaration of Independence, which laid out colonial grievances, challenged the divine right to rule, and expounded the Lockean principle of the right to rebel against an unjust government.
When creating the Constitution, the founders drew greatly from fundamental British documents, such as Clause 39 of Magna Carta, which declared, no free man shall be seized, imprisoned, dispossessed, outlawed, or exiled in any way, nor in any way ruined against, except by the lawful judgment of his peers and the law of the land. This underlines the procedural due process clause of the Fifth Amendment.
The Third Amendment is rooted in the Petition of Right, which guarantees that authorities cannot quarter soldiers in civilian homes. In contrast, Montesquieu and Aristotle influenced the founders in the creation of Articles 1, 2, and 3, which divide American government into 3 distinct branches to ensure balance and impede tyranny.
Many of the first state constitutions included protections of natural rights to ensure life, liberty, and property, influencing the contrasting positive and negative rights found in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 explicitly lays out the matters that Congress can legislate on, whereas Article 1, Section 9 prevents against granting titles of nobility, and Article 1, Section 10 similarly limits the powers of the states for consistency.
Challenges to the rule of law have come from a variety of sources. President Andrew Jackson ignored the Supreme Court decision in Worcester v. Georgia, which held that states cannot impose regulations on Native American land. Thus, the Indian Removal Act remained in place for another 18 years and enabled the Trail of Tears, which led to the death of thousands of Native Americans.
The Civil War was a series of challenges to the rule of law. The North ignoring the Fugitive Slave Act, the South rebelling even with representation, and President Abraham Lincoln suspending the writ of habeas corpus all demonstrated disrespect for established institutions and policies.
Additionally, living constitutionalism can be a challenge to the rule of law because it allows the application of the Constitution to change without undergoing amendments. For example, Roe v. Wade used the implied right to privacy to justify a constitutional right to an abortion.
Finally, the legislature is often exempt from laws they pass. Under the Freedom of Information Act, Congress does not have to make all legislative documents accessible to people, obscuring government processes.
Rule of law is integral to the preservation of a free society. Marbury v. Madison recognized judicial review, which allows the judicial branch to determine the constitutionality of the laws. This upholds a free society under the rule of law by better preserving higher law.
While respect for rule of law may be an important component of a just society, it is not the sole factor in determining a free society. Henry David Thoreau declared that if the government required people to participate in injustice by obeying unjust laws, then people should break the laws, even if they ended up in prison. This was seen in the Jim Crow South, specifically during the Greensboro sit-ins, where 45 Black students were arrested for breaking laws that segregated diners.
More recently, the events of January 6th have demonstrated the importance of rule of law. Despite the insurrectionists that attempted to violently overturn the results of the 2020 election, Congress proceeded with the established electoral count process until rioters were at the chamber doors. Additionally, Mike Pence went against his party desires and said, "President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election."
Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter warned that if one man can be allowed to determine for himself what is law, every man can. For society to function properly, rule of law is an absolute necessity. Without embedding it in government, the people are left vulnerable to tyranny and violations of their liberties. Thank you. This concludes our statement, and we are now ready for your follow-up.
Wonderful opening statement. My question is it ever acceptable for a president to be above the law, to be above the rule of law? You give several examples, especially Abraham Lincoln doing it. Is it ever acceptable? Why or why not?
Is acceptable and in accordance with pardon power, especially if someone is in jail for an unjust reason, such as in Colorado, for example, the governor of Colorado pardoned many people for violating marijuana charges because the drug was legalized in the state of Colorado.
Sometimes it is unjustly done, as is in the case of Executive Order 9066 with the Korematsu case, which led to the Japanese internment, where even though it was decided constitutional by the Supreme Court, it was a massive violation against rights, illegally done.
However, in accordance with the use of executive privilege, it is often necessary for presidents to withhold information to protect security of the people. For example, the legislative branch in Congress is exempt from withholding or from providing certain information under the Freedom of Information Act in order to protect national security.
You mentioned the Korematsu case. If it was in fact legally done, it was signed, it was passed, it was approved by the Supreme Court. How and what made that a violation of the rule of law? Can something be wrong but not a violation of the rule of law?
It was wrong and a violation of the rule of law because it took away the due process rights of the Japanese Americans by just sentencing them to go to the internment camps rather than giving them a fair trial.
It also is a violation of strict scrutiny, which race is protected under, which was violated in the Korematsu case, which you can find strict scrutiny in footnote 4 of the Cornelia case.
Caroline Products US is what my colleague meant to say. However, it is also important to note that just because something does not align with majority opinion does not necessarily mean it doesn't follow rule of law. We see this in the case Texas v. Johnson, where it protects the right of flag burning. While I don't think that is something that is majoritarily agreed upon, it is still it falls under rule of law and the protection of First Amendment rights.
There's a wonderful Supreme Court say, and I think it came from Justice Frankfurter, that the Constitution is not a suicide pact. If in fact a president perceives a threat to public safety and acts, I'm just having a hard time drawing the line. I agree with you, they got it wrong in Korematsu, but at the time the public overwhelmingly supported it. Fear played a huge role, as it does at critical times in our political being. How do we make a judgment at the time that we need to slow down and let the lengthy processes of legislating and judging go into effect, as opposed to essentially pushing the suicide button?
One of the most important things that was missed in the Korematsu case is that they did not respect John Locke's social contract theory, and that the fact that the Japanese Americans had done nothing to violate the social contract, and there was no reason for them to do anything that could go against their rights to liberty.
Okay, so maybe you're putting me in a different direction. In a sense, Roosevelt got away with it because the public supported it. So are we saying that without that democracy can help to undermine the rule of law, because what people want and believe can be contrary to what the rule of law requires?
Democracy can undermine the rule of law. For example, in ancient Greece, when the democracy ruled that they wanted to enslave all of the women and children and kill the men on the island of Lesbos, it did inhibit the rule of law because they did this unjustly.
Democracy does not necessarily undermine rule of law, and I think it best preserves rule of law because the people are one of the greatest checks on the government. For example, without the ability of individuals to exercise their First Amendment rights, it is often much harder to keep authorities in line. For example, recently, President Donald Trump took classified information to his private residence, and without the check of the media on those in power, I do not think this would have been discovered, and he would not have been put back into his place.
Public opinion shows we don't care, and we don't care about January 6th anymore. And so I'm back to this problem almost in Korematsu. Roosevelt got away with internment because the public was in fear. I don't know what it is that is making the public so uninterested in the January 6th insurrection, but we don't seem to care. We're more interested in inflation and the Kardashians right now. How do we deal with this?
As stated in James Madison's Fed 51, if men were an evil, no government would be necessary. This can be traced back to the concepts of original sin, where man is inherently flawed, and so we need to create checks and balances on them, such as in the Constitution of the United States. And that is one of the safeguards against tyrannies that happened in like Korematsu.
I do think we care, though, about January 6th. I don't think that necessarily has lost our mind. For example, trials are currently happening where the jury is ignoring the claims that President Donald Trump was instructing. The people are defending themselves, saying that former President Donald Trump was instructing them to say, steal a coat rack. But they are dismissing these claims because they are not valid, still showing that we value democracy, or that we value democracy, and we value a peaceful transition of power, and we have not lost that connection with rule of law.
I think you make a solid argument that the rule of law matters enormously on the national scale, on the big scale. Does it matter in the same way in the very small scale, in school board elections and issues like that, where if I have a problem, in a local problem, I will call somebody that I know in city government and say, what do I need to do about this? And who can I talk to make this problem go away? And if you think that, when you become taxpayers, you will do that as well. And you're going to rely on relationships rather than the rule of law. Does it really matter at the local level where personalities become so much more important?
I do believe that it does matter at the local level because of what Justice Brandes said, and the idea that there's not a one-size-fits-all answer, and federalism is the best way to go about addressing some of these concerns. For example, sanctuary cities do this best in preserving the natural rights of others that are not protected federally. For example, Chicago.
People can still protest against their school boards. This was seen in our own school district of Wauwatosa when many people were protesting against the mask mandate that was extended in Wauwatosa schools.
As believed by Montesquieu, small homogeneous communities are the best way to solve most conflicts, and most legislation should be done at the local level. The importance of the federal government mostly is to have a higher law that can protect overarching aspects of our society, and then use the ratchet theory to add on more rights at the state level, such as in the state of Wisconsin, we add on the Fourth Amendment protections, such as no required traffic stops in our state.
No
Let's-
random traffic stops.
Random
No,
traffic
wow.
stops.
Wow.
Additionally, in our own school board and in our own school, we have seen recently there was a threat and danger to our high school. Somebody brought a gun on last Friday. Somebody brought a gun into our school, and now we are all forced to be randomly searched every time we enter the building doors, showing that at the most local levels, it is necessary to establish this relationship with the community and the officials to ensure community safety overall. I think this is an appropriate measure to take because there was such an imminent threat and danger to others.
Okay, so that's an example of the use of the prerogative power. You're consenting to being searched without a warrant because you're in fear of something, whether it's a gun or whatever. When does it stop? What if school officials say, you know, this has been so convenient to be able to frisk these kids or make them do other things? We're just going to keep it in place. This makes the school just work a whole lot better.
There needs to be a suspicion to that someone could be endangering the school. For example, as in our school, there was a gun that was brought, so they had this suspicion to search the kids to
When
keep
does
the
it
rest.
stop? My question was, when is it enough? Next Tuesday, next Wednesday, 5 years from now? How do you draw that line to say, hey, we need to go back to status quo ante where these people have the same rights of others to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures?
When there is no suspicion that public safety is in danger, that's when the searches can stop.
Additionally, before this, we were not under the ability to be searched. It immediately happened as soon as there was an imminent threat and danger. What I presume is that if this continues on for a couple of weeks and the school district is no longer finding any dangerous evidence in the backpacks and on the persons of the students, this will not be in place anymore, and we will go back to normal proceedings for exiting and entering our school building.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And you presume, I hope you all keep a keen eye on what's happening within your own bailiwick. You know, just as you talked about the importance of the rule of law and the importance of individual rights. You got to think of the Commonwealth, but you also got to think of the individual. I want to say, well done. I loved your understanding, your historic understanding, your constitutional understanding, the cases. I wrote down all the different things you brought in to bear as part of our founding documents. I thought you all responded very well to when things got a little more random and a little more rougher, and you guys handled yourselves with aplomb and grace, and helped each other out whenever one of you had a moment of little slip there, okay? Because that's what happens. And so I really, you know, I thought you guys really worked very well as a team, and but just overall, nicely done, very good.
Yes, teamwork. You were a great team to work together. Kudos, you're the first time I've heard the word original sin today, and yet that was an extraordinarily influential concept for the framers of the Constitution. It was one of those underlying ideas they simply took for granted. Of course, we are, you know, we are born sinners, and you know, even the most laid back of Anglicans at the time would have still had an abiding sense of original sin, which is how they understood that they could not count on the goodness of themselves or future leaders. So I think seriously, that's an important concept that we don't bring into this discussion a whole lot. I like your mention of the Freedom of Information Act as part of that openness requirement. Governments tend to be running on inertia. If it's so convenient to keep things, keep documents secret or just undisclosed, then they will do that unless compelled to do otherwise.
Or to keep
similarly-
frisking students, right?
Absolutely. If it's because students have a right to demand to see to see the paperwork, the documents that to set policy for them. In addition, once all the process gets in place of searching students as they enter the building, it's much more work to get rid of it. So it'll stay in place until something compels them to do otherwise. It may be budgets, it may be student protest, but don't expect it to go away just because it's no longer necessary. Got on a rant there, pardon me.
Well, I agree with my colleagues that you did a terrific job. You lost control of the rule of law discussion a little bit, but and probably I'm most guilty of encouraging you to do that. Couple things that I'd urge you to think about, and actually you make me want to go back and do some more research. When looking at what Madison did with the Bill of Rights, having made that promise at the Constitutional Convention and during the ratification debates, he compiled the rights in state constitutions. I'm not sure he went back to the Petition of Right. And you make me curious how much our concept of rights had evolved from Petition of Right to 1776 when the original state constitutions and bills of rights were written. Certainly there's a huge difference between the Virginia Declaration of Rights of 1776, which just blends right in principles of classical republicanism, and the Bill of Rights that emerged out of the debates after the Constitutional Convention. So there's you just make me want to go back and learn more, and that's always fun to come away from a presentation with that. The other thing I'd make you think about is go back and think more about Machiavelli. If people are inclined to behave when they are in fear, gun in school, attack of planes on 9/11, that gives governments more power. So the thing Machiavelli recommends is make sure that people are kept in a perpetual state of fear. And is that where we're going? Fear of climate change, fear of COVID, fear of guns in school. When we're motivated by fear, we react very, very differently than we do when we're thinking rationally and thinking with any compassion for other people's rights or interests. And well, fear at World War II as well. So I guess where I'm sort of left is the discussion of the rule of law may be an abstraction that is really something precious to hang on to, but difficult to do so when it's in rulers' interests to violate rule of law by keeping people in fear. On that cheerful note, Wauwatosa West, you did a great job. Thank you for an excellent, thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, everyone.